संसार धावानललीडलोका प्रणय कारुण्य घन घनत्वं
संसार धावा नललीडलोका
प्राप्तस्य कल्याण गुणार्णवास्य वन्दे गुरो श्रीचरणरविन्दम् महाप्रभो कीर्तन नृत्य गीता वादित्रमाद्यान् मनसुरसेना
महाप्रभो कीर्तन नृत्य गीता वादित्रमाद्यान् मनसुरसेना
रोमाञ्चकम्पाश्रुतरङ्गभाजो वन्दे गुरो श्रीचरणरविन्दम्
रोमाञ्चकम्पाश्रुतरङ्गभाजो वन्दे गुरो श्रीचरणरविन्दम्
श्रीविग्रह आराधन नित्यनाना शृङ्गारतन्मन्दिरमार्जनादो
श्रीविग्रहाराधन नित्यनाना शृङ्गारतन्मन्दिरमार्जनादो
युक्तस्य भक्तां शनियुञ्जतोऽपि वन्दे गुरो श्रीचरणरविन्दम्
युक्तस्य भक्तं शनियुञ्जतोऽपि वन्दे गुरो श्रीचरणरविन्दम्
चतुर्विधा श्रीभगवत्प्रसादो स्वादन्न तृप्तान् हरिभक्तसङ्गम्
चतुर्विधा श्रीभगवत्प्रसाद स्वादन्न तृप्तान् हरिभक्तसङ्गम्
कृत्वैव तृप्ति भजता सदैव वन्दे गुरो श्रीचरणरविन्दम्
तृप्तिं भजत सदैव वन्दे गुरो श्रीचरणरविन्दम्
श्रीराधिका माधवयोरपारा माधुर्यलीला गुणरूपनाम्ना श्रीराधिका
माधवयोरपार मधुरलीला गुणरूपनाम्ना
श्रीराधिका माधवयोरपारा माधुर्यलीला गुणरूपनाम्ना
श्रीराधिका माधवयोरपार मधुरलीला गुणरूपनाम्ना
प्रतीक्षणा स्वादनलोलुपास्या वन्दे गुरो श्रीचरणरविन्दम्
प्रतीक्षणा स्वादनलोलुपास्या वन्दे गुरो श्रीचरणरविन्दम्
निकुञ्जयूनो रतिकेली सिद्धय यायालिभिर्युक्तिरपेक्षणीया
निकुञ्जयो नो रतिकेली सिद्धय यायालिभिर्युक्तिरपेक्षणीया तत्रादिदाक्षादतिवल्लभास्या
वन्दे गुरो श्रीचरणरविन्दम्
तत्रादिदाक्षादतिवल्लभास्या वन्दे गुरो श्रीचरणरविन्दम्
साक्षात् हरित्वेन समस्तशास्त्रे युक्तस्तथा भाव्यतेव सद्भिः
सख्यदरिद्वेन समस्तशास्त्रे उक्तस्तथा भाव्यतेव सद्भिः
किन्तु प्रभोर्या प्रिय एव तस्या वन्दे गुरो श्रीचरणरविन्दम्
किन्तु प्रभो प्रिय एव तस्या वन्दे गुरो श्रीचरणरविन्दम्
यस्य प्रसादात् भगवत्प्रसादो यस्य प्रसादात् न गति कुतोऽपि
Yasya prasada bhagava prasada Yasya prasada nagati kutapi
यस्य प्रसादात् भगवत्प्रसादो यस्य प्रसादात् न गति कुतोऽपि
Yasya prasada bhagava prasada Yasya prasada nagati kutapi
ध्यायस्तु वंशस्य यशस्त्रिसन्ध्यां वन्दे गुरो श्रीचरणरविन्दम्
Jayam tubam tasya satrisanjam Vande Guru Sri Charanaravinda
वन्दे गुरो श्रीचरणरविन्दम् वन्दे गुरो श्रीचरणरविन्दम्
Vande Guru Sri Charanaravinda Vande Guru Sri Charanaravinda
वन्दे गुरो श्रीचरणरविन्दम् वन्दे गुरो श्रीचरणरविन्दम्
Vande Guru Sri Charanaravinda Vande Guru Sri Charanaravinda
नमो विष्णुपदाय कृष्णप्रस्थाय भूतले श्रीमते भक्तिवेदान्त स्वामी नित्यनामिने
Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Nityanamine
नमस्ते सरस्वती देवे गौरवाणी प्रचारिणे निर्विशेष शून्यवादी पाश्चात्य देशतारिणे
Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Sunnavadi Pachata Disatarine
जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासादि गौर भक्त वृंद जय
Jaya
श्री
Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadara Srivasadi Gaura Bhakta
जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासादि गौर भक्त वृंद जय
Jaya
श्री
Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadara Srivasadi Gaura Bhakta
जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासादि गौर भक्त वृंद जय
Jaya
श्री
Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadara Srivasadi Gaura Bhakta
Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare
Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama,
Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare,
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare,
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare,
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram,
Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare,
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram,
Ram Ram, Hare Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna.
Shri Radha Damodar ki.
Namamishwaram Sachidanantarupam Lasat Kundalam Gokule Brajamanam
Namami Sharam Sachi. Bhajamana.
Yashoda Biolokaladavamanam Param Drishtamadyantato Vritagopya
Yashoda Biyalokaladavamanam Paramistam Atkantato Rutagopya
Rudantam Muhurnetra Yugmamrijantam Sakrivatamodaram Bhaktipadam Iti Trixpalilabhirananda Kunde Swargo Shami Marjantam Akyapayantam Tadiyeshu tadneshu bhaktirchitatvam Puna prematastam sarta vritivande Param deva moksham na mokshapatim va Nacharyam praneham vare sadapiha Idam deva purnata gopala balam Sada nimanasya virastam kimanye Idam te mukam bojam akyantanile Kritam kundalai snikta raktas chugopya Muhusumbitam bimbaratnakarame Manasya virastam malam lakshalabe Namo Devatamodarananta Vishnu Prasita Prabodukka Jalapimagnam Kripa Drishti Vrishyati Dina Bandhanu Prahanisha Mamagnyam Ye Lakshidishya Kuberatmajaupatta Mudraivayatvat Tvaya Mochitau Bhakti Bhajau Kritau Cha Tata prema bhaktim swakami prayacha Namo kshidraho misti damodareha Namaste studamne spruradipti damne Vadiyodharaya ta vishvasya damne Namo Radhikaya Tvatiya Priyaya Namo Nanta Lilaya हिरण्याकाशीपूर्वक्षः शीलटङ्कानकालाये इतो नरसिंहो परतो नरसिंहो यतो यतो यामि ततो नरसिंहो बाहिर्नरसिंहो हृदये नरसिंहो नरसिंहमदिं शरणं प्रपद्ये वकरकमलवरेणखाम् अद्भुतशृङ्गां दलिता हिरण्यकशिपू तनुभृङ्गाम् केशवधृता नरहरिरूपा जय जगदीश हरे जय जगदीश हरे जय जगदीश हरे
Abakara kamala bare naka adbhuta sringa dalita hiranyakashipu tanabhinga kesabhadrita narari rupa jai jagadisha re jai jagadisha
जय नरसिंहदेव जय नरसिंहदेव नरसिंहदेव जय नरसिंहदेव जय प्रहलाद महाराज प्रहलाद महाराज प्रहलाद महाराज जय प्रहलाद महाराज नित्य गौर हरि बोल हरि बोल हरि बोल गौर हरि बोल
नित्य गौर हरि बोल हरि बोल हरि बोल नित्य गौर हरि बोल जय श्री श्री भक्तिपथ सर्व विघ्नाशन कनिष्ठहरे भगवान की जय जय भक्त श्रेष्ठ प्रहलाद महाराज की जय निताय गौर हरि प्रमानंद श्री वृंदाई तुलसी बाई प्रिय के सब सत्य विष्णु भक्ति प्रदे देवी वृंदाई तुलसी बाई प्रिय के सब सत्य विष्णु भक्ति प्रदे देवी सतवताय नमः वृंदाई तुलसी देवाई प्रिय के सब सत्य कृष्ण भक्ति प्रदे देवी सतवताय नमः जय श्रीमती तुलसी महारानी वृंद देवी की जय sing, Tulsi? You sure you can sing?
Yeah.
Okay. Don't mess up.
नमो नमः तुलसी कृष्ण प्रियासी नमो नमः
Tulasi Krishna Preyasi Namo Namaha.
तुलसी कृष्ण प्रियासी नमो नमः
Tulasi Krishna Preyasi Namo Namaha.
राधा कृष्ण सेवा पाओ ए अभिलाषी
Radha Krishna Seva Mama Eya Devasi.
राधा कृष्ण सेवा पाओ ए अभिलाषी
Radha Krishna Seva Prabhu Eya Devasi.
जे तोमार शरण लो तारा वांछा पूर्णा हो
Je tumhara sharanana taravanta guna.
कृपा कोरी करो तारे वृंदावन वासी
Tumhe kripa kori karatare Vrindavanavasi.
मोराए विलास कुंजे दियो वा
Moraye yavira vila kunde diyava.
नयने हेरी बो सदा युगल रूप राशि
Aminayane deva sada jugala ruparasi.
ए निवेदन धरो शकीर अनुगत करो
Eni vedanantara sakiranu gatakara.
सेवाधिकार दिए करो निज दासी
Sevayadi karadiye koroni jadasi.
दीना कृष्ण दास को ये न मोरा होय
Dina Krishna das ko eye namora.
श्री राधा गोविंद प्रेमे सदा न भासी
Shri Radha Govinda preme sadaye nabasi.
श्री राधा गोविंद प्रेमे सदा न भासी
Ami Shri Radha Govinda preme sadaye nabasi.
नमो नमः तुलसी कृष्ण प्रियासी नमो नमः
Tulasi Krishna Preyasi Namo Namaha.
यानि कानि च पापानि ब्रह्म हत्यादिकानि च तानि तानि प्रणक्षन्ति प्रदक्षिणा पदे पदे यानि कानि च पापानि ब्रह्म हत्यादिकानि च तानि तानि प्रणक्षन्ति प्रदक्षिणा पदे पदे
Pani Brahma Kani Kani Sa Tani Tani Prana Sante Pradakshina Pani Pani
Yani Kani Cha Papani Brahma Hatyadikani Cha Tani Tani Pranakshanti Pradakshina Pade Pade
Yani Kani Sa Papani Brahma Kani Kani Sa Tani Tani Prana Sante Pradakshina Pani Pani
Hare Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare
Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare
Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare
Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Rama Hare Hare
Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare
Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Rama Hare Hare
Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare
Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Rama Hare Hare
Jaya Tulsi Maharani Jaya Tulsi Maharani Jaya Tulsi Maharani Jaya Tulsi Maharani
Jaya Tulsi Maharani
Jaya Vrunda Devi Jaya Vrunda Devi Jaya Vrunda Devi Jaya Vrunda Devi Jaya Jaya Prabhupada 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 Jaya Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Jaya Gurudev 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 Jaya Jaya Gurudev जय तुलसी महारानी की
जय श्री वृंदाई तुलसी देवाय प्रियाय के सब सत्य विष्णु भक्ति प्रादि देवी सत्वताय नमः वृंदाई तुलसी देवाय प्रियाय के सब सत्य विष्णु भक्ति प्रादि देवी सत्वताय नमः Vrindayai Tulasi Devai Priyayai Kesava Satya Krishna Bhakti Prade Devi Sattvatai Jai Shrimati Tulasi Maharani Vrinda Devi Ki Jai. Oh Tulasi, beloved Krishna, I bow before you again and again. My desire to obtain the service of Shishi Radha and Krishna, whoever takes shelter of you as wishes fulfilled. Bestow your mercy upon him, you make him resident of Vrindavan. My desire that you also grant me a residence in pleasure groves of Sri Vrindavan. Thus within my vision, I will always behold the beautiful pastimes of Radha and Krishna. I beg you to make me a follower of Kaviti Service of Raj. Please give me the privilege of devotional service and make me your own met servant. This very fallen and lowly servant of Krishna praise. May I always swim in love Shri Radha and Govinda. Shri Mati Tulasi Maharani Brinda Devi Ki Jai. Shri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu Sikhastakam Ki Jai. Chaito Darpanam Majanam Pavamadavanini Vapanam Shri Akari Vachandrika Vitaranam Vidyavadhu Jivanam Anandam Buddhi Vardhanam Pratipadam Purnamrita Shadanam Sarvatmasnam Param Paravijayati Shri Krishna Sankirtanam Nam Namakari Vaudha Nija Sarva Shaktis Tatrapita Niyamita Smarane Nakala Ita Yusitava Kripaya Bhagavan Mamati Durdhaiva Midishami Ajani Nanuraga Trinadapi Sunichena Tarorapi Saishnuna Amani Namana Dena Kirtaniya Sada Hari Nadhanam Najanam Nasundarim Kavitamba Jagadishaka Maye Mama Janmani Janmanishwari Bhavatar Bhakti Rahaitu Kitwai Oinanda Tanuja Kinkaram Paritamam Bisame Baba Buddho Kripaya Tava Pada Pankaja Stithaduli Sadrisham Vichintaya Nanam Galora Shrudharaya Padanam Gada Gada Rudaya Gira Pulakai Chitam Bapukada Tavanam Agrahane Bhavishyati Jugaitam Nimishena Chakyusha Pravasaitam Shunyaitam Jagat Sarvam Govinda Virahename Aslishava Padaratam Pinashtumam Adarshnar Marmahatam Karotuva Jatha Tathava Viradhatulam Pato Matpranatastu Saivana Paraha Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Jai Shri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu Shri Krishtakam Ki Jai Namo Mahavaranayo Krishna Prema Pradayate Krishnayo Krishna Chaitanya Namine Gaurati Shinama Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prishtaya Bhutale Shrimati Bhakti Vedanta Saminiti Namine Namaste Saraswati Devam Gauravani Pracharine Nivishesha Shunnavadi Pachattari Satarine. Glory to the Shri Krishna Sankirtana, which cleanses the heart of the dust accumulated for years and extinguishes the fire of conditioned life or repeated birth and death. This Sankirtan moment is the prime benediction for humanity at large because it spreads the rays of the benediction moon. It is the life of all transcendental knowledge. It increases the ocean of transcendental bliss and enables us to fully taste the nectar for which we're always anxious. O my Lord, Your holy name alone can render all benediction to living beings. And thus you have hundreds and millions of names like Krishna and Govinda. In these transcendental names, you have invested your transcendental energies. There are not even hard and fast rules for chanting these names. O my Lord, out of kindness you enable us to easily approach you by holy names. But I'm so unfortunate that I have no attraction for them. One should chant the holy name of the Lord in a humble state of mind, thinking oneself a lord on straw in the street. One should be more tolerant than the tree, devoid of all sense of false prestige, and should be ready to offer all respect to others. In such state of mind, one can chant the holy name of the Lord constantly. O Almighty Lord, I have no desire to accumulate wealth, nor do I desire beautiful women, nor do I want any number of followers. I only want your cause that devotes from service birth after birth. O son of Maharaj Nanda Krishna, I am your eternal servitor. Yes, some rather I am fallen in this ocean of birth and death. Please pick me up from this ocean of death and place me as one of the atoms at the Lotus feet. O my Lord, when will my eyes be decorated with tears of love flowing constantly when I chant your holy name? When will my voice choke up, and will the hairs of my body stand on end at the recitation of your name? Oh Govinda, feeling your separation, I am considering a moment to be like 12 years or more. Tears are flowing from my eyes like torrents of rain, and I'm feeling all vacant in the world in your absence. I know no one but Krishna as my Lord, and he should remain so, even if he handles me roughly by his embrace, or makes me broken-hearted by not being present before me. He is completely free to do anything and everything, for his Lord is my worshipful Lord unconditionally. Shri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu Shri Krishna Ki Jai. There are 10 offenses in matter of chanting the holy name of the Lord that should be avoided. They are as follows. 1. To blaspheme the devotees who dedicate their life for propagating the holy name of the Lord. 2. To consider names of demigods, the Lord Shiva and Lord Brahma, to be equal to or independent of the name Lord Vishnu. 3. To disobey the orders of the spiritual master. 4. To blaspheme the Vedic scriptures or scriptures and pursuits of Vedic version. 5. To consider the glories of chanting Hare Krishna to be imagination. 6. To give some interpretation to the holy name of the Lord. 7. To commit sinful activities on the strength of chanting the holy name. 8. To consider the chanting of Hare Krishna as one of the auspicious ritualistic activities, which often Vedas as fruitive activities, karma kanda. 9. To instruct the faithless person about the glories of the holy name. And 10. To not have complete faith in chanting with the holy names, and to maintain material attachments, even after understanding so many instructions in this matter. It also an offense to be inattentive while chanting. Every devotee who claims to be Vaishnava must carefully guard against 10 offenses in order to quickly achieve your desired success. Krishna. Now let us offer our most humble obeisances unto all the Vaishnavas, devotees of the Lord. They are just like desired trees. They can fulfill the desires of everyone, and they are full of compassion for the fallen conditioned souls. Jaivancha kalpatarubhyascha kripa sindhubhyaiva cha paritanam pavanebhyo Vaishnavibhyo namo namaha. Jai Ananta Koti Vaishnavrind ki jai. Shri Guru Pranam Mangala Charan ki jai. Om Jnanatimmirandasya Gyananjana Salakaya Chakshurunmilitam Jena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Shri Chaitanya Manovistam Stapitam Jena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swaparantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Jodhaparakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavam Cha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunathavintam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakam Vitam Cha Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Shrimate Bhakti Vedanta Swaminiti Namine Namaste Saraswati Devim Gauravani Pracharine Nivishesha Sunnavadi Patsatari Shatarine Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Shrimate Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Namine Shri Varshabhana Videvi Deitaya Kripavdaye Krishna Sambandha Vijnana Daine Prabhave Namaha Madhurjojala Premadhya Shri Rupanuga Bhaktida Shri Gaura Karuna Shakti Vigrahaya Namostute Namaste Gauravane Shimurtaye Rinatarine Rupanuga Viruddha Pusidanta Dvantaharine Namagora Kishoraya Sakchavera Murtaye Vipralambhara Sambhude Padambujayate Namaha Namo Bhakti Vinodaya Satchit Anandanamine Gaura Shakti Swarupaya Rupanuga Varayate Gaura Virbhava Bhumitsvam Nirdesha Sajana Priya Vaishnava Sarva Bhuma Sri Jagannatayate Namaha Vancha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhu Vaivacha Paritanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavibhyo Namo Namaha Namo Mahavaranayo Krishna Prema Pradayate Krishnayo Krishna Chaitanya Namine Gauratvishe Namaha Vancha Krishna Bhakta Rupa Swarupakam Bhaktavatara Bhaktakyam Namami Bhakti Shaktikam Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namastute Jayatam Saratapango Mamamandamater Gati Masarvasya Param Bhojo Radha Madanamohano Divyarvindaranya Kalpadumadha Shmaranagara Shingasanastu Shmaradha Shila Govinda Devo Prishtali Visheva Manu Shmarami Shman Rasara Sarambi Bamshvata Tatastita Karshan Venu Sanar Gopir Gopinata Shri Suna Tapta Kanchana Gorangi Radhe Vrindavanishari Purusavano Suti Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda
Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasari Gaur Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Shri Rama Samhita Ki Jai Ishvara Parama Krishna Sachitananda Vigraha Anadi Radhe Govinda Sarvakarana Karanam Chintamani Prakara Sadma Sakalpa Riksha Laksha Vritesha Surabhira Vipayanta Lakshmi Sahasra Satasambrahma Sevyamanam Govinda Madi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Venam Kranandam Ravinda Dalayataksham Parhavatam Samasitam Buddha Sundarangam Kanda Prakoti Kamaniya Vishesha Sobham Govindam Adi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Alola Chandra Kala Sadvanamalya Vamsi Ratnam Gadam Pranahikiri Kalavilasam Shamam Tribangala Litanyita Prakasam Govinda Madi Purisham Tamaham Bhajamagna Angani Yasya Sakalendriya Vrittimanti Pasyanti Panti Kalyanti Chiram Jaganti Ananda Chinmaya Sadujvala Vigrahasya Govinda Madi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Advaitam Achutam Anadim Anantarupam Adyam Purana Purisham Navayovanam Cha Vede Sudurlabam Adurlam Atma Bhakto Govinda Madi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Pantastakoti Satavatsala Sampragamyo Vayoratabi Manasomani Pungamanam Soprasti Yat Prabhadasim Vichintitatve Govinda Madi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Ekopya Sura Chaitam Jagananda Kotim Yes Chakti Rasti Jagananda Chaya Yadanta Dantarasta Paramanu Chayantarasta Govinda Madi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Yat Bhava Bhavita Dio Marajasta Taiva Samprapya Rupa Mahima Sanayana Bhusa Suktarya Meva Nigama Pratitastavanti Govinda Madi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Ananda Chinmaya Rasarbhati Bhavitabis Tabirya Eva Nija Rupa Daya Kalabi Goloka Evinavasat Akilat Mabuta Govinda Madi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Premanjana Charita Bhakti Vilochanena Santaksa Deva Hidesa Vilokayanti Yam Shama Sundarama Chintya Gunat Swarupa Govinda Madi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Ramadi Murti Sukalani Menatista Nanavatara Makarud Bhuvanesa Kintu Krishna Swayam Samavavat Paramam Pamamyo Govinda Madi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Asya Prabha Pavato Jagadanda Koti Koti Swasesa Vasadadi Vibhuti Binam Tad Brahmanis Kalamanam Tamasesa Bhutam Govinda Adipurisham Tamaham Bhajami Mayahi Yasya Jagadanda Satani Sutya Jaigunya Tad Vishaya Veda Vitaya Manam Sadva Valambi Parasatvam Prasuddha Satvam Govinda Madipurisham Tamaham Bhajami Ananda Chinmaya Rasad Mataya Manasuya Prani Nam Patifulam Smaratam Ubretya Lilaya Tena Bhuvanani Jayaya Jasram Govinda Madipurisham Tamaham Bhajami Goloka Namni Nijadamni Talichatasya Devi Maheswa Didama Sutesha Tesha Tete Prabhavani Chera Vyatascha Yena Govinda Madipurisham Tamaham Bhajami Bhajami Sastistati Palaya Sadhava Saktireka Chayeva Yasya Bhuvanani Vivarti Durga Ichana Rupam Abhyasi Testa Govinda Madi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Shiram Yata Dadi Vikara Visesa Yoga Sanjayate Nahitata Pritakasti Eto Yasambutam Apitata Samapaitika Govinda Madi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Dipartsadevi Dasantanam Abhipetya Dipayate Vivitaheta Samanu Dharma Yastadrike Vicha Vishnutaya Vibhati Govinda Madi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Yakar Nanarna Vajali Bhajisma Yoga Nidramananta Jagadanda Saroma Kupa Dhara Satim Avalambya Paramsamutim Govinda Madi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Yasyaka Nisvasita Kalamata Valambya Jivanti Loma Villaja Jagadanata Vishnu Mahansa Yasya Kalabi Sesha Govinda Madi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Basmanya Tasma Sakalation Jason Teja Swiyam Kiyat Pakatayata Vidaptra Brahmaya Esha Jagadanda Vidana Karta Govinda Madi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Yat Pada Pala Vigam Vinadaya Kumbha Dvante Pranama Samaya Sakanadi Raja Vignam Vihanta Malamas Jagatayasya Govinda Madi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Agni Mahiga Ganamambu Marudisas Chakalas Tatatma Manasiti Jagatrayani Yasmad Bhavanti Vibhavanti Visantiyancha Govinda Madi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Yaschak Suresa Savita Sakalagrahanam Raja Samasta Surmurti Sesiteja Yasya Gaya Brahmati Sambrita Kala Chakro Govinda Madi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Dharmota Papani Jayastudayasta Bamsi Brahmadi Kita Patagavate Jiva Yadata Matra Vibhava Prakata Bhava Govinda Madi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Yastrinda Gopa Matamendra Mahosva Karma Bandana Rupa Falabhajana Matanoti Karmani Nidhati Kinchija Bhakti Bhajam Govinda Madi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Yam Kroda Kama Saja Panahadi Biti Vatsaya Moha Guru Guru Vasevya Bhava Sanchintya Tasha Sadhusantanam Apareta Govinda Madi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Siya Kanta Kanta Parama Purusha Kapatara Vajramabu Mishchintamani Kanamaitaya Mamritam Katagana Natyam Gamanam Abhimam Sipriyasaki Chiranandam Jyoti Paramapita Dasvadya Radhacha Sayata Shiradi Visavati Shirabi Vyasta Sumaha Nimesa Dakyava Rajitinaya Prabhi Samaya Vajeswita Dvam Tamaham Ihugola Kamitya Vidantas Te Santakshiti Virachari Kati Baye Shigurvastaka prayers Kijay. Spiritual masters receiving benediction from the ocean of mercy, just as a cloud pours water on the forest fire to extinguish it, so the spiritual master delivers the material afflicted world by extinguishing the blazing fire of material existence of my respectful base, not the lotus tree. As such spiritual masters, an ocean of auspicious qualities, chanting the holy name, dancing in ecstasy, singing and playing musical instruments, the spiritual master is always gladdened by the Sankirtan movement of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, because he is relishing the mellows of pure devotion with his mind. Sometimes his hair stands on end, he feels quivering in his body, and tears flow from his eyes like waves. So, if my respectful base, not the lotus tree, is such spiritual master. The spiritual master is always engaged in the temple worship of Shri Radha and Krishna. He also engaged his disciples in such worship. They dressed the deities in beautiful clothes, anonymous, clean their temple, and perform other similar worship. But Lord, for my respectful base, the lotus tree is such spiritual master. His spiritual master is always offering Krishna four kinds of delicious food, and his eyes was elixir, drunk and stuck. When the spiritual master sees that the devotee is satisfied by eating Bhagavad Prasada, he is satisfied of my respectful base. The lotus tree is such spiritual master. Spiritual master is always eager to hear and chant about the unlimited conjugal pastimes of Radhika and Madhava, and their qualities, names, and forms. The spiritual master aspires to relish these at every moment. I, for my respectful basis, not to lotus tree is such spiritual master. Spiritual master is very dear because he is expert in assisting gopis who at different times make different tasteful arrangements for the perfection of Radha and Krishna's conjugal loving affairs within the groves of Vrindavana. For my most humble basis, not to lotus tree is such spiritual master. The spiritual master to be honored as much the Supreme Lord because he is the most competent to serve the Lord. This is acknowledged in all real scriptures and followed by all authorities. Therefore, I offer my respectful basis not to lotus tree as such spiritual master is a bona fide representative of Sri Hare Krishna. By the mercy of the spiritual master, I receive the benediction of Krishna. Without the grace of the spiritual master, I cannot make any advancement. Therefore, I should always remember and praise the spiritual master at least 3 times a day. I offer my respectful basis to the lotus feet of my spiritual master, his divine grace. A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai, Srimad Bhagavatam Grantaraj Ki Jai, Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 3, Chapter 6, and we're going to do text 9 again. Sadyadhyatma sadidevascha sadibhuta iti trida virat prano dasavidha ekada hridayena cha sa adhyatma, the body and the mind with all the senses. Sa adidaiva, and the controlling demigods of the senses. Cha, and sa adibhuta, the present objectives. Iti, thus. Chida, 3. Virat, gigantic. Prana, moving force. Dasa vida, 10 kinds. Ikada, only one only. Hridayena, living energy. Cha, also. Translation by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. The gigantic universal form is represented by 3, 10, and 1, in the sense that He is the body and the mind and the senses. He is the dynamic force for all movements by 10 kinds of life energy, and He is the one heart where life energy is generated. Purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. In Bhagavad Gita 7.4-5, it is stated that the 8 elements, earth, water, fire, air, sky, mind, intelligence, and false ego, are all products of the Lord's inferior energy, whereas the living entities, who are seen to utilize the inferior energy, originally belonged to the superior energy, the internal potency of the Lord. The 8 inferior energies work grossly and subtly, whereas the superior energy works as the central generating force. This is experienced in the human body. The gross elements, namely earth, etc., form the external gross body and are like a coat, whereas the subtle mind and false ego act like the inner clothing of the body. The movements of the body are first generated from the heart, and all the activities of the body are made possible by the senses, powered by the 10 kinds of air within the body. The 10 kinds of air are described as follows. The main air passing through the nose in breathing is called prana. The air which passes through the rectum as evacuated bodily air is called apana. The air which adjusts the foodstuff within the stomach and which sometimes sounds as belching is called samana. The air which passes through the throat and the stoppage of which constitutes suffocation is called udana air. And the total air which circulates throughout the entire body is called vyana air. Subtler than these 5 airs, there are others also. That which facilitates the opening of the eyes, mouth, etc. is called anaga air. The air which increases appetite is called krikara air. The air which helps contraction is called kurma air. The air which helps relaxation by opening the mouth wide in yawning is called devadatta air. And the air which helps sustenance is called dhananjaya air. All these airs are generated from the center of the heart, which is one only. This central energy is superior energy of the Lord, who is seated within the heart with the soul of the body, who acts under the guidance of the Lord. This is explained in Bhagavad Gita 15:15 as follows. Sarvasya cham hridisani misto mataksmiti gyanam apaharancha Vedaishta sarviraham eva vedyo vedanta krit vedavid eva chaham. The complete central force is generated from the heart by the Lord, who is seated there and who helps the conditioned soul in remembering and forgetting. The conditioned state is due to the soul's forgetfulness of his relationship of subordination to the Lord. One who wants to continue to forget the Lord is helped by the Lord to forget him, birth after birth. But one who remembers him by dint of association with the devotee of the Lord is helped to remember him more and more. Thus the conditioned soul can ultimately go back home, back to Godhead. This process of transcendental help by the Lord is described in Bhagavad Gita 10:10 as follows. Tesam satata yuktanam bhajatam pritipurvakam dadami buddhi yogam tam yenamam upayanti te. The buddhi yoga process of self-realization with intelligence, transcendental to the mind, devotional service, can alone elevate one from the conditioned state of material entanglement in the cosmic construction. The conditioned state of the living entity is like that of a person who is within the depths of a huge mechanical arrangement. The mental speculators can reach the point of buddhi yoga after many, many lifetimes of speculation, but the intelligent person who begins from the platform of intelligence above the mind makes rapid progress in self-realization. Because the buddhi yoga process entails no fear of deterioration or retrogression at any time, it is the guaranteed path to self-realization as confirmed in Bhagavad Gita 2.40. The mental speculators cannot understand that the 2 birds Svatasvatara Upanishad. Sitting in one tree are the soul and the supersoul. The individual soul eats the fruit of the tree, while the other bird does not eat the fruit, but only observes the activities of the eating bird without attachment. The witnessing bird helps the fruit-eating bird perform fruitive activities. One who can understand this difference between the soul and the supersoul, or God and the living entities, is certainly still in the entanglement of the cosmic machinery. One who cannot understand this difference between the soul and the supersoul, or God and the living entities, is certainly still in the entanglement of the cosmic machinery, and thus must still await the time when he will be free from bondage. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. The gigantic universal form is represented by 3, 10, and 1, in the sense that he is the body, and the mind, and the senses. He is the dynamic force for all movements by 10 kinds of life energy, and he is the one heart where life energy is generated. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. So there are very many points in this purport, and they're all wonderful. And take some time to understand this, but I want to go directly to one point first. And that is the example of the two birds sitting in the heart. And it says here in Bhagavad Gita 2:40, the mental speculators cannot understand that the two birds, Svatasvatara Upanishad, this is a quote from the Svatasvatara Upanishad, sitting in one tree are the soul and the supersoul. The individual soul eats the fruit of the tree, while the other bird does not eat the fruit, but only observes the activities of the eating bird. Without attachment, the witnessing bird helps perform fruitive activities. One who cannot understand this difference between the soul and the supersoul, or God and the living entities, is certainly still in the entanglement of the cosmic machinery, and thus must still await the time when he will be free from bondage. And this is an amazing statement. Why? Because a lot of people talk about self-realization, but very few understand what it is. And this last paragraph explains the real gist of self-realization. So self-realization begins by what's called anamoya, perceiving food as God. And then it progresses to anamoya, manamoya, where you begin to understand that there are other living beings except yourself, besides yourself, and then manamoya, and then it goes to understanding vijnanamoya, that there is anamoya. So the 5 stages of this self-realization. So it goes from seeing food as as God, and then seeing the person that's delivering the food as God, and then seeing many other living entities, and you're starting to open up your consciousness that there are many, many other living entities, and then understanding the existence of the mind and the senses and the mind and perception, which helps you expand your understanding. And then beyond that, there is what's called joyfulness of Krishna consciousness, or transcendental ecstatic relationship with the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So this different levels of realization of God is very important to understand. And then actually when we see the difference, first of all, we see material nature, and that was already very complicated because there's 24 elements. It's reduced down to 8 as like the general understanding, and then more specific, broken down into 24 material elements that are the inferior spiritual energy of the Lord. It's spiritual, but it is not always manifest. Sometimes it becomes unmanifest, so therefore it's called the inferior spiritual energy. Then after that, we begin to realize that we have senses, mind, and intelligence, and ego. And then when we begin to understand that, then we can understand that all these things are coming from Krishna. We're not independent, and there's a superior source to this bodily construction and to all the other living entities, and therefore we are not independent. We are dependent on something superior to us, and then eventually we understand that that superior person is Krishna. So it goes from the material nature to ourself, and then many other living entities, and then we see that there's a difference between the body and the soul, and then there's a difference between the individual soul and the supreme soul, or Krishna. So that is the full gamut of self-realization. In other words, you can't identify who you are or who we are in a vacuum. We identify who we are through relationships. If you live in a vacuum, like let's say in a dark cave or in a dark box, and there's no relationship with anyone, and you're in darkness, you would not be able to really figure out what's the purpose of life and who you are, and what is the universe, and how does the mind function, and what's superior to the mind is the intelligence, and then there's also the ego, which can be false ego or real ego. You wouldn't understand any of that. It's only through relationships. So relationships with materialistic people, you become stuck. You become thwarted in your attempt to have self-realization, because they think that there's only the body, and therefore there's sense gratification, and you get stuck there. But if you associate with genuine devotees, then you can transcend that, let's say, that trap, and you can understand there's way more reality than simply matter and sense gratification and the body. And then we begin to understand the difference between the body and the soul, and the difference between the individual and dead matter. So now it's a higher level of understanding. And then we have to understand the difference between the mind and the intelligence. Now this is hard to understand for most people, but there are different functions between the mind and the intelligence. The mind receives the impressions of the other senses, the eyes, the ears, the nose, the tongue, the skin, and it's called the sixth sense, because it receives those impressions or experiences of the other senses, and it puts them into memory. And also, it makes a quick judgment. I like this or I don't like it. But the judgment is not based on a careful understanding of what's being experienced. It's a quick judgment. Just like you might meet someone and you say, well, I don't really like this person. You don't even know them, but you have a feeling that you don't like this person. Sometimes it may be correct, sometimes it might not be correct. So you don't know until there's more experience with that person. Right? So the difference between the mind and intelligence is the mind is like a computer, the software, the computer. It receives a lot of data and it stores it, and it might make quick decisions about it. Yeah, it might accept. In other words, the mind is always accepting and rejecting, accepting and rejecting. But when we come to the intelligence is much more deliberative. It begins to think and analyze things and try to see things in their rightful frame of reference and in context of their environment and so forth. And eventually the mind can make much better decisions whether something is good or bad. I mean, the intelligence can make decisions of what is actually good and what is not good. And then above the intelligence is the false ego. Now, the false ego can be corrupted by the mind because the mind is making quick decisions, and oftentimes they're wrong. And so this is explained in Bhagavad Gita. Let's take a look at that. One second, let me find it. It's in the 6th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, and it says, so if we look at the 6th chapter, verse 7 and 8. So it says, actually, every living entity is intended to abide by the dictation of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is seated in everyone's heart as Paramatma. When the mind is misled by the external illusory energy, one becomes entangled in material activities. Therefore, as soon as the mind is controlled through one of the yoga systems, one should be considered to have already reached the destination. Okay, so when it says, when the mind is misled by the external illusory energy, one becomes entangled in material activities. So there's an example for this. And that is the example of the chariot with 5 horses. So the 5 horses are the 5 senses: eyes, ears, nose, tongue, skin. And then there is the ropes or the straps that are connecting the 5 horses to the driver of the chariot, right? So the driver of the chariot, those ropes, that's like the communication to the driver, between the horses and the driver. And the driver is like compared to the mind. And he's trying to control the horses, but sometimes the horses overwhelm him, and he loses control. And then behind the driver is the passenger, and the passenger is the let's call it the silent observer of the whole thing. So when the driver loses control of the horses, then there's accidents that happen, and there's sometimes there's crashes and things like that. So therefore, unless the intelligence controls the mind and dictates to the mind, one loses control and becomes mainly self-destructive. Because if the mind or the driver loses control of the horses, then there's going to be some destructive thing that happens. There'll be a crash or whatever. So, therefore, the statement, when the mind is misled by the external illusory energy, one becomes entangled in material activities. Okay, so this is, let's take a look at 248 also. 248. That's very important. So, Yoga Karmani. It says, So Krishna tells Arjuna that he should act in yoga. And what is that? Yoga. Yoga means to concentrate the mind upon the Supreme by controlling the ever-disturbing senses. And who is the Supreme? The Supreme is the Lord. And because he himself is telling Arjuna to fight, Arjuna has nothing to do with the results of the fight. Gain or victory are Krishna's concern. Arjuna is simply advised to act according to the dictation of Krishna. The following of Krishna's dictation is real yoga, and this is practiced in the process called Krishna consciousness. By Krishna consciousness only can one give up the sense of proprietorship. One has to become the servant of Krishna or the servant of Krishna. That is the right way to discharge duty in Krishna consciousness, which alone can help one to act in yoga. Okay, so here we see, this is like amazing statements, because our mind can play tricks on us. When we don't follow the regulative principles, the mind plays tricks on us, and we become entrapped. And then it says in the 6th chapter, 5th verse, it says, since the mind is the central point of yoga practice, Atma refers here to the mind. The purpose of the yoga system is to control the mind and to draw it away from attachment to sense objects. It is stressed herein that the mind must be so trained that it can deliver the conditioned soul from the mire of nescience or ignorance. In material existence, one is subjected to the influence of the mind and the senses. In fact, the pure soul is entangled in the material world because the mind is involved with the false ego, which desires to lord it over material nature. Therefore, the mind should be trained so that it will not be attracted by the glitter of material nature, and in this way the conditioned soul may be saved. One should not degrade oneself by attraction to sense objects. The more one is attracted by sense objects, the more one becomes entangled in material existence. The best way to disentangle oneself is to always engage the mind in Krishna consciousness. Now, let me ask you a question, Prabhuji. Are you teaching your son this? Tell the truth. Huh? Not quite. Not at all. Come on. Tell the truth. Are you teaching your kids this? Huh?
When they're hearing through your classes.
I know, but besides that, are you actually teaching them? Probably, are you teaching your sons this, or your older son?
Little bit, Maharaj. I'm majorly from the classes, but I'm just trying.
You see, that's why we're talking about this today. This is extremely important. Prabhu, did you teach your son this? No. Okay, thank you very much for telling the truth. But that's when you tell the truth, that's the beginning of finding out what the truth is. That's the beginning of finding out what the truth is, when you tell the truth, right? So here, this is very important. Now, I'm going to go deeply into it now, because this is the fundamental thing about life, and there's an amazing lecture by Srila Prabhupada. Srimad Bhagavatam, 6th canto, 1st chapter, 62nd verse. This whole section is about Ajamila, and it says, 6:162. But before that, we're going to read some more things. Okay, so it says, okay, let's start with 6:162. It says, okay, the verse says, as far as possible, he patiently tried to remember the instructions of the Shastras, not even to see a woman. With the help of this knowledge and his intellect, he tried to control his lusty desires. But because of the force of Cupid within his heart, he failed to control his mind. Whoa, this is a big verse. Ajamil was trained to be a brahmana, and he was also a pujari. He was actually worshiping deities. At 16, he was already worshiping the deities. Right? but his mind became agitated. And here Prabhupada says, unless one is very strong in knowledge, patience, and proper bodily, mental, and intellectual behavior, controlling one's lusty desires is extremely difficult. Thus, after seeing a man embracing a young woman and practically doing everything required for sex life, even a fully qualified brahmana, as described above, could not control his lusty desires and restrain himself from pursuing them. Because of the force of materialistic life, to maintain self-control is extremely difficult unless one is specifically under the protection of the Supreme Personality of Godhead through devotional service. Okay, so this is the verse 6162. All right, so now Prabhupada goes into this really deeply in the lecture about this verse. And he says, so his mind, meaning Ajamila, became very much agitated. He was a young man, and he is seeing in his front that another young man and woman embracing and kissing. It is very difficult to restrain. Unless one is very advanced, it is not possible. That I was reciting the verse of Yamunacharya. Yadavadi mamachet padaravinde Krishna padaravinde nava nava dhamam rantum asit tadavadi vatanari agame bhavanti sustu nisti. Unless one is very strong in Krishna consciousness, it is very difficult to restrain the mind and the senses. It is very difficult. Here it is said, mana madana vepitum. Madana means Cupid, or lusty desires. So Ajamil was agitated. His mind was agitated by lusty desires. Therefore, we have to be very careful for the association. Sangat sanjayate kama. We develop different consciousness by particular association. Therefore, for advancing in Krishna consciousness, we must associate with the devotees. You cannot advance in Krishna consciousness without being in the association of devotees. So, one of the homeworks I gave kids some time ago was write down your schedule in 24 hours and see who you are associating with more, devotees or non-devotees. What do you think? Yeah, way more, way more association with non-devotees. Way more. And these are your kids, right?
Maharaj, one question there. Let's say if they're associating with devotee kids, but they're not actually doing service, is that still considered association?
It's bad association.
So
It's not good association. A real devotee is always engaged in some kind of devotional service. So if they just get together and start talking nonsense, that's bad association, even though they're supposedly devotee kids. Like one day, I was rushing to come to get from the farm to be on time for the Sunday program, right? And I saw one of our kids walking the opposite way. I'm coming toward the temple. He's walking the opposite way with a basketball, and going like this with the basketball, walking toward the court and that's when everyone should be coming to the Sunday feast. So he wasn't interested at all in Krishna consciousness. He was interested in basketball. Right? So that's our own kids. Right? You'd think the parents should bring their kids to the temple, right? No, even the parents weren't coming to the temple. Right? So we have a serious problem because we're not actually instructing our kids properly, and they're getting contaminated. Anyway, let's see. I'm not saying everybody, but there's too many people not doing it properly. Let's put it like that. So, it says here, unless one is very strong in Krishna consciousness, it is very difficult to restrain the mind and the senses. It is very difficult. Here it is said, Mana Madana Vepitum. Madana means Cupid or lusty desires. So Ajamil was agitated. His mind was agitated by lusty desires. Therefore, we have to be very careful for the association. Sangat Sanjayate Kama. We develop different consciousness by particular association. Therefore, for advancing in Krishna consciousness, we must associate with the devotees. You cannot advance in Krishna consciousness without being in the association of devotees. He's talking about good devotees here, people who actually follow the regulative principles. Right? You cannot advance in Krishna consciousness without being in association of devotees. Srila Narottam Das Thakur says, and he says something about the audience. He says, Mana Madana Vepitum. Cupid is always disturbing. This material world means that Madana, Cupid, the whole material world. Yan Maitunadi Grihamedi Sukam Hitucham, Srimad Bhagavatam 7.9.45. Grihamedi means those who have decided to prolong this body for sense enjoyment. That is going on. Everyone is trying so hard in big cities. They are working so hard like hogs and dogs. Not for Krishna. They say that we are hungry, we must work very hard. But that is not the fact. The real fact is that we want to enjoy sex. So far hunger is concerned, you can control, but sex desire is very difficult to control. So this material world means that Maitunadi, Maituna means sex intercourse. That is the beginning of material life. You know very well how strong is sex desire in the Western countries. Even old man going to die, he has also, in other words, he also has this desire. Although he cannot enjoy sex, still he's trying his best by medicine, by other means. It's talking about Viagra and things like that, right? By other means, or going to Switzerland, getting monkey glands to replace your worn-out human glands. There's an operation like that. It costs a lot of money, and it rejuvenates somewhat your potency to engage in sex. There's advertising every day on the internet and all over the place for erectile dysfunction. Have you heard any of those? Never? You never heard that? I mean, obviously.
We get emails.
You get every day. You get it. You never saw anything like that. I'm glad you didn't, but but it's there everywhere. You know, especially on the internet. You know, and everyone's experts in erectile dysfunction. You know, and you go and pay a lot of money to get your erectile fixed up. You know, it's complete nonsense. You know, but that's what, because they want to have sex right up to the last day of life. Okay. Although he cannot enjoy sex, still he is trying his best by medicine, by other means, by intoxication, by stimulant. So that is the only happiness of this material world. Yan Maitunadi Grihamedi Sukami Tuchams, Srimad Bhagavatam 7.9.45. The human civilization means to create the population. The human civilization means to create the population Dira, not to be disturbed by sex impulse. This is human civilization. Not that so many so-called sadhus, and they are now preaching openly the yoga by sex. Yoga by sex. They have invented. Yoga means to find out the Supreme Lord within oneself, within the core of the heart. That is real yoga. Yoga means to connect. To connect with whom? With sex life? No. The sex life connection is there even in the birds, the beasts, the ants, the animals, the worms, everywhere, because the whole world is going on sex life. Does it require any yoga system? No, it's a rhetorical question. Obviously, no. You don't have to learn yoga to have sex, right? But people are fallen so down that they have invented, because people want it. And these rascals, they exploit. Yeah, there are yoga schools that they have sex, and it's called, what's the name? It has a special name. That kind of yoga sex. I'll think of it in a minute. So, and they have, there's people now teaching yoga where women self excite each other and have orgasms. That's the yoga. I mean, it's nonsense stuff. It's big time nonsense, right? It's going on a big level, right, all over the world, but especially in the United States. So, but people, they're so down that they have invented because people want it, and these rascals, they exploit. This is going on. So real yoga system means to control the senses, not to increase or indulge in the senses. They are clearly advertising in the Western countries. Transcendental meditation. There is no restriction. There is no question of faith. In other words, Maharishi is teaching non-spiritual yoga, and he calls it transcendental meditation, right? And you don't have to follow the strict rules, like, no meat eating, no gambling, no illicit sex, no intoxication. You might say that meat eating is not good, but he's not stopping you. Just like the new Prime Minister of England. Did you see the picture of him?
Yeah,
right.
with Prabhupada.
With Prabhupada. But he made a statement also. He says, I'm not going to tell people what they should eat or what they shouldn't eat. And I'm going to support the British farmers who have goats and cows, and I'm going to help them expand their businesses. I'm not going to be restrictive. He's made that statement today. No, obviously he's a politician, right? Yeah. He's got to, because because there are a lot of restrictions put on the dairy people, and people are growing animals to be killed by the European, what do they call it? The European, let's say, government.
European Union?
Union, yeah, by the European Union. So he's saying, look, I'm not gonna restrict you guys anymore, like the others have done. You can eat whatever you want, and I'm gonna help you expand your business of exporting British meat. Basically, that's what he's saying, right? So this is shocking, right? On one hand, he has a garland on, and he's looking directly at Prabhupada, like he's bowing down and so forth. And then it comes out with a statement like this, right? That's the problem with democratic governments. Prabhupada says democracy is called demonocracy, right? Because you're being controlled by your constituency. You have to pander to them so they'll vote for you, right? It's very dangerous. Okay. So it says, all these living entities, so Krishna says, the mind is dictating, you go here, immediately the legs go. No, I'm sorry. He says, our mind is always agitated for sense enjoyment. Mind is the master of the senses, or the chief man, just like superintendent. Mind is dictating, and the senses, the mind is dictating. You go here, you go there, immediately the legs go. You see here, immediately the eyes see. So mind is the center. Manak sastan indriyani pakritistani karsati. Bhagavad Gita 15:7. Bhagavad Gita. This living entity, Mamaivam, so Krishna says, all these living entities, they are my part and parcel. No, so question may be, then why they are rotting here? If the living entities are part and parcel of Krishna or God, so why does he not live with God? The immediate answer is Manak sastan indriyani prakritistani karsati. Bhagavad Gita 15:7. These living entities, these conditioned souls who have come to this material world, the only reason is that they want to satisfy the senses. Mana sastan indriyani. Therefore, there is struggle for existence. He wants to enjoy. He wants to become the enjoyer, but he is not enjoyer. That is called illusion. He is enjoyed. He cannot enjoy. Enjoyer is only Krishna, Purusha. Purusha Saswatam. Okay, now this is a long lecture. I'm not going to read all of it, but you get the idea what we're talking about here. So therefore it says in the 6th chapter, 5th text of Bhagavad Gita, it says, it is stressed herein that the mind must be so trained that it can deliver the conditioned soul from the mire, or the dirt, of nescience or ignorance. In material existence, one is subjected to the influence of the mind and the senses. In fact, the pure soul is entangled in the material world because the mind is involved with the false ego, which desires to lord it over material nature. Therefore, the mind should be trained so that it will not be attracted by the glitter of material nature, and in this way, the conditioned soul may be saved. One should not degrade oneself by attraction to sense objects. The more one is attracted by sense objects, the more one becomes entangled in material existence. The best way to disentangle oneself is to always engage the mind in Krishna consciousness. The word he is used for emphasizing this point, that is, that one must do this. It is also said, Mana eva manusyanam. For man, mind is the cause of bondage, and mind is the cause of liberation. Mind absorbed in sense objects is the cause of bondage, and mind detached from sense objects is the cause of liberation. Amrita Bindu Upanishad 2. Therefore, the mind, which is always engaged in Krishna consciousness, is the cause of supreme liberation. This is an extremely important purport. And when it says the mind is involved with the false ego, that is lethal. That's really dangerous, because that means one will engage in self-destructive activity. And we see this. We see this. Kids, they look like little saints when they're young, but they hit the puberty and then teenage life and then college, and they start getting affected by the material nature. And I mean, maybe not everyone, but most. And then they're lost. It might be 20, 30, 40, 50 years before they can wake up. If they wake up. If they wake up. And you can only wake up in the association of genuine devotees. It cannot be done by yourself. You can try, but it will not be complete. It will be incomplete. It's only an association of genuine devotees who are actually following the regulative principles and are not falling down and not wavering at all. Okay, so coming back, see, when it talks about the two birds, right, that means that we're always being watched by Krishna, so we can't get away with anything. He's right there in our heart. He's closer to us than anyone else. And he knows everything we're thinking, everything we're desiring, everything we're planning. He knows. He's seeing it. He's not saying anything. And if we want something really bad, like illicit sex or, this thing or that thing, then he helps us to get it. He helps us. He actually helps us to forget him, because we can't forget Krishna unless he helps us. We're not independent, right? So everything is going to depend on the desires that we have. And if we associate with materialistic people, we'll develop their type of desires. It's just very simple. And if we associate with genuine devotees, we'll develop their type of desires, which are to please Prabhupada and Krishna, or please Guru and Krishna. And even the Guru has to please Krishna. It's not that he is God. He also has to please Krishna. So we see this is a very serious thing to be Krishna conscious. And if you can teach your kids at a young age to understand these big points, that's going to help them. They are unarmed when they go to school nowadays. They're completely unarmed. They have no shield of protection from the onslaught that they're going to be subjected to. And we have to give them the armor and the empowerment of genuine self-realization knowledge of Krishna and one's eternal relationship with Krishna, so that they don't waver and they don't buckle to that onslaught that they're going to receive. Or don't send them to school. Just educate them yourself at home. Right? At one point, I started having a regular school, just myself and anyone's kids that wanted, any parents that wanted to give their kids to me to educate, and I did it. But as usual, people, got cold feet and didn't want to continue it. Right? Our own people. They wanted their kid to go to school and get contaminated. So that's the problem. But here we see, I'm willing to do it again if there's any interest in it. You only need to have a class for like 2 or 3 hours, and then they have to do the homework, right? And in the class, we do discuss science, but from the perspective of Krishna consciousness, not from the demon's perspective, right? And we learn about all kinds of things. Anyway, that's another point. Okay, so we'll stop right there. There's a lot more in this purport, so we're going to go over it several days now, because it's a very profound purport. Any questions?
Maharaj,
Yeah.
I want to understand the external potency through analogy.
External potency?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, the external potency is basically sex attraction. That's the strongest point of it. It's not meat eating, it's not gambling, it's not intoxication. But once one gets attracted to sex, they will break all the principles. They'll intoxicate, they'll eat meat, etc. I know one sannyasi, very good sannyasi for many years, very close devotee to Prabhupada. He was given a zone to preach in Africa, and he ended up eating meat and having sex with black prostitutes. He fell down really big time. Then he, Prabhupada forgave him, and then he rehabilitated himself. But his preaching became more or less stymied, or very limited after that, because he went so far down and very quickly. So the external energy, you want to know about that, an example. There's an example of it right there. You have the example of Ajamila also, right? He was a Pakka Brahmin and devotee, right? But one day he's in the forest, walking from one place to another, and he sees these man and woman drunk and having sex, and it completely corrupted his mind. And then he got so corrupted, he married a prostitute. He had 10 kids with her. And then to support her, he was cheating, lying, stealing, or doing anything to get money to keep her happy, right? But because he was a devotee until 16, he named his last son Narayana.
Narayana.
And that saved him. Right? So everyone will eventually, anyone who's been Krishna conscious will eventually go back to Godhead, but it might be many, many lifetimes, because they might fall down. But they can never forget Krishna. Once you come close through devotional service, it's very hard to forget completely. But they can deviate for a long, long time. Could be many lifetimes, or even as one lifetime, just like the sannyas. He deviated big time, but he came back. And when he died, I'm almost absolutely sure he died thinking of Prabhupada, because the last years of his life, he was completely dedicated to Prabhupada. But that's after falling down big. See? So the external energy is under the it seems to be under the control of Durga Mata, and her job is to test you, to what you would call what's the word for that? Vet you. Look that word up, vet. Vetting. I think it's VETT. VET. Okay, when you vet someone, you analyze them and test them to see if they really know C++ or JavaScript or whatever, if they actually can solve problems, or if they're actually a devotee or not. What does it say? How's it spelled?
VET.
VET, okay.
It's the verb is make a careful and critical examination of something.
Yeah, very careful, critical examination of something. Right. So Durga is vetting the living entities. And if they want sense gratification, she gives it to them, and then she takes it away from them and devastates them. Right? And they go crazy, or they get frustrated, and they get bewildered. It's just like, Trump, like he's a billionaire, right? But now there's so many court cases against him. They keep threatening that he's going to go to jail, right? They're trying to do to him what they did to Al Capone, right? They put Al Capone in jail, and then he died in jail. So you can imagine, Trump is president of the United States. This has never happened before. He's president of the United States. He's being prosecuted like a normal criminal now, right? And if he loses some of those cases, he could go to jail. So you imagine what Durga is doing to him.
So is Maharaj, is entire material nature is considered an external potency of the Lord?
Yeah, but it's spiritual. It's not material. But it sometimes manifests and sometimes manifests. So it's bewildering to the living entities.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's Krishna's, and he's completely in control of it. And he's teaching people in two ways, as we said before, through Bhagavad Gita and also through Durga Mata, who is vetting everyone to see if they actually deserve to go back to Godhead or not. Therefore, you're going to have to pass her test, and her test gets worse and worse the more you advance. Now look, for example, Haridas Thakur, he got the super test 2 times in a lonely place. He was approached by, first time, a prostitute who was paid to make him fall down. And he turned her into a devotee. But she did everything she could to make him fall down, and he didn't waver. But Lord Shiva, right? He actually fell down once. We'll look at Vishwamrita Muni. He fell down definitely by Menaka, who was the Apsari. Lord Shiva also did fall down one time when he started running after Mohini Murti. He left his wife, right? Therefore, the test gets worse and worse the higher you go spiritually. So Maya herself came in front of Haridas Thakur, and basically she was virtually naked, and then she was doing different positions with her body to entice him. And he didn't waver at all. And then she surrendered unto him, and he taught her to chant Hare Krishna. That's what great. That's why he's in the pranam prayers, right? They say Om Tat Vishnu. They say Haridas Thakur Ki Jai. We mention him right in the beginning of the pranam prayers because he's a Muslim. He was born a Muslim, right? But he became the Acharya of the holy name, by Lord Chaitanya's mercy. And he passed the worst test. Maya herself, first the prostitute came and did everything she could to make him fall down. He did. But then Maya herself came, and basically she was naked and showing her body in different positions and so forth. He didn't waver at all. And then she surrendered unto him, and he taught her to chant Hare Krishna. Okay? So, don't think that we're going to get out of this material world easily, because we're going to be tested. Just like you want to get into Microsoft or Amazon or any of these big, they're going to test you really hard now, right? Because they have thousands of people asking to get jobs, right? So they're going to take the top of those, the cream of that big assembly, right? So they're giving hard tests to get a job nowadays. You see. But now this is even worse. We're trying to go back to Godhead, get out of the material world. It's not going to be easy. But if you follow strictly the regulative principles, you'll breeze through it. Right? But if you waver, then you just complicate things for yourself. You complicate it. And the idea is that when you are liberated, other people are liberated with you. 21 generations of your family are also liberated. So you don't go alone. You're going to benefit many, many people. Okay, so we'll stop right there. Hare Krishna. We'll continue with this. Sometimes people go, oh, Haridas is always talking about sex. No, I'm not talking about it. Prabhupada is talking about it. I'm just repeating what he says.
That example that you gave about that South Africa
Yeah.
incident, that happened. So in that case, the devotee was very firm, and so what happened? Like because of the bad association, or because of his own material desires? Like why the devotee?
No, we all have those desires, but in the bad association, he was not able to control it anymore. Look, we all came to the material world. You have to understand, we didn't come here to eat meat or gamble or take intoxication. We came here for sense gratification, independent of Krishna. Right? So you're not going to get rid of that overnight. It's a big, big thing. It's a big chain of entanglement. We've been engaged in this thing in every different body we had. Right? So he mentioned, the cows, the worms, the birds, they're all engaged in this thing, right? So we engaged in all those different species. So now we come to human form. It's the only form in which we can get free of it. The animals can't get free of it, but we can. But if you associate with the wrong people, you waste the human chance to get out of this whole mess, and you go back into the animal forms. You have to go, and you're stuck, because all they're doing is eating, sleeping, mating, and defending, and a lot of mating. Right? Okay, so we'll stop right there. Thank you. Hare Krishna. So we have to follow the rule. Look, but don't touch. Look, but don't touch. So when you go into some expensive store, say, look, but don't touch anything, Okay, go ahead.
Shri Guru Charana Padma Kevala Bhakati Sadma Bandhamu Isavadana Mate
Savadana Mate
Jahara प्रसादे बाय हे बाबा तोरिया जय
Chanar prasade bhai e bhavatoriya jai
कृष्ण प्राप्ति हो जहाँ होते गुरुमुख पद्मा वाक्य चित्तते कोरिया क्या हरना करिह मानी आशा
हरण कोरिया माने आशा
श्री गुरु चरानी रति ऐसे होता मागती ये प्रसादे पूरे सर्वासा
प्रसादे पूरे सर्वासा
चक्षुदान दिलो जे जन्मे जन्मे प्रभु से
चक्षुदान दिलो जे जन्मे जन्मे प्रभु से
दिव्य ज्ञान हृदय प्रकाशित प्रेम भक्ति जहाँ होते अविद्या विनाशा जाते
भक्ति जहाँ होते अविद्या विनाश जाते
वेदे गाय जहाँ राचरितो श्री गुरु करुणा सिंधु आदम जनार बंधु श्री गुरु करुणा सिंधु आदम जनार बंधु लोके ना लोके राजीवाना प्रभु कोरो दोया देह मोरे पाद छाया प्रभु कोरो दोया देह मोरे पाद छाया
प्रभु कोरो दोया देह मोरे पाद छाया
ये बीजास घुस त्रिभुवाना प्रभुपाद पतित पवाना जय प्रभुपदा जय प्रभुपदा जय प्रभुपदा जय प्रभुपदा
प्रभुपदा जय प्रभुपदा जय प्रभुपदा जय प्रभुपदा
जय गुरुदेवा जय गुरुदेवा जय गुरुदेवा जय गुरुदेवा नमो विष्णुपदाय कृष्णप्रस्थाय भूतले श्रीमते भक्ति वेदांत स्वामी नित्यनामिने
विष्णुपदाय कृष्णप्रस्थाय भूतले श्रीमते भक्ति वेदांत स्वामी नित्यनामिने
नमस्ते सरस्वती देवी गौरवाणी प्रचारिणे निर्विशेष शून्यवादी पाश्चात्यादेशतारिणे जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैता गदाधर शिवसदि गौर भक्तवृंदा Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare
Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare
Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare
Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare
Nitya Gaura Hari Bol Hari Bol Hari Bol Nitya Gaura Hari Bol
Hari Bol Hari Bol Nitya Gaura Hari Bol Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahansa Parivajikacharasatara Shri Shimad His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Jai Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai Prem Shikoho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhaktivedanta Ki Jai Shri Radha Krishna Gopinath San Kunda Radha Kunda Giri Govardhan Ki Jai Shri Vrindavan Dham Ki Jai Shri Mayapura Dham Ki Jai Jagannath Puri Dham Ki Jai Tulasi Devi Ki Jai Bhakti Devi Ki Jai Ganga Maya Ki Jai Jamuna Maya Ki Jai Samaveda Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai Nitai Gaura Premanandi. All glory is to Samaveda. All glory to Samaveda. Glory is to Shri Guru and Shri Guranga. All glory is to Srila Prabhupada Patita Pavana Ki Jai Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Namaste Saraswati Devi Guru Devi The lotus feet of our spiritual master are the only way by which we can attain the pure devotional service. I bow down to his lotus feet with great awe and reverence. By grace, I can cross the ocean of material suffering and obtain the mercy of Krishna. My only wish is to have my consciousness purified by the words emanating from his lotus mouth. Attachment to his lotus feet is a perfection that fulfills all desires. He opens my darkened eyes and fills my heart with transcendental knowledge. He is my Lord, birth after birth. From him ecstatic prema emanates, by him ignorance is destroyed. The Vedic scriptures sing his charity. Our spiritual master, the ocean of mercy. And O Master, be merciful unto us. Give us the shade of your lotus feet. Your fame is spread throughout all the three worlds. We take shelter of lotus feet. Srila Prabhupada, Patita Pavana.